Finovate showcases cutting-edge banking and financial technology through a global conference series featuring short-form demos and thought leadership. Now, the conversation continues on the Finovate podcast.
Hello, everybody. Greg Palmer welcoming you to the Finovate podcast. We are wrapping up our conversations with the FinovateEurope Best of Show winners this week. It was a great event in London there early February. And as I said, the last couple of weeks, you can find all of the demo videos from that event at finovate.com/videos. Some really cool stuff to pay attention to there. And of course, joining us today, we have our third Best of Show winner, Márk Hetényi, CEO of Ready. Márk, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's always fun to talk about what's happening in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, as I mentioned, all those videos are out there. You can find Ready's video up there as well. But Márk, for people who haven't had a chance to take a look at that video yet, can you start by introducing yourself and give us a little bit of an insight into what Ready is all about?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I myself am leading the product development at Ready. I used to be the CEO. And we used to do a lot of banking work and then sort of managed services and then there are large core banking implementations. But we came up with a platform that basically does context engineering, reads your systems, reads the systems of a bank or non-banking as the case may be, and builds a deterministic map of that system so that AI agents can use it in a deterministic fashion and give you reliable answers for whatever purpose that you want, whether it's documentation or knowledge-based sharing or specifications to fix bugs or data mapping, process modeling, or bigger transformation projects. So that's in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so people who are paying close attention might have realized this is actually your second Best of Show win in 2 years. Really impressive to be able to go back to back. Can you start this conversation off by talking about some of those new pieces that you built between FinovateEurope 2025 and this year's 2026 version?
It's a good question. To be honest, most of what we've done and most of what we built was actually in response to having launched the product last year at Finovate, which was very exciting for us, and then going out and effectively touring the world, Middle East, US, 3 or 4 or 5 times last year, all over Europe, talking to customers, POCs, customer engagements. And we honed in on, the exact kind of stuff that the customers were looking for. And, a lot of people everybody's being pressured or sort of reacting to the AI movement and saying we have to do something with AI, either because they want to or they're interested in it or because their bosses are telling them to. And a lot of these people who we're talking to, the enterprise architects, were coming back, oh yeah, but it's not giving me the right answers. It's not to the level of reliability that I can take and trust it with a more complex task or a more complex transition or transformation. It doesn't have the viewpoint of the whole architecture. So that kind of platform that we built in the basics of what we built and what we launched with, which helps to tie together ecosystem elements and build processes and data models, we've honed in on that whole system comprehension, legacy and non-legacy, mapping the system, making a deterministic graph behind it, making a deterministic ontology, and all sorts of really deep, nifty stuff, which make the precision of the answers way above what we're seeing right now on the markets. A lot of people are happy with getting a 70-80% accuracy in a complex system. We're seeing like above 92, 93, 94, 95%, even on chat answers. So it's exciting. And that's what the market wanted from us, to be honest. When we went out and did our spiel with the customers and what are they looking for? They were looking for an automated tool, which then pulls their systems up and makes them participate in their world a lot better than they did before.
Yeah. And I think I'm really happy that Finovate was a part of the story here, giving you kind of an impetus to go out and have these conversations. This story is something which we see a lot of, as you can probably imagine, where you make a launch and then you go back and realize you have a lot of these conversations with customers and it gives you some really good direction on what you need to do next. You touched on something that I want to dig into a little bit more. Obviously you're spot on. We keep saying every year AI is getting hotter and hotter. You can't afford to ignore it. I'm wondering from your perspective, if that has turned into more action from the financial institution side. I'm certainly hoping that banks are generally farther along than they were at this point last year. But what are you seeing in terms of this year versus last year from your perspective?
I mean, AI is now, there's definitely the elephant in the room. It can't be ignored in that perspective. Even last year, we saw that the AI adoption was starting to take hold in banks. And I think it's even, I would say, more than starting. So it was one of those things where it was such a rush to get into it. Everybody wanted to get a piece of it that even last year we saw AI. What I would say, I wouldn't even say it was on the fringes, but, robotics process automation going one step further, 2 steps further with AI to automate, and now even more complex tasks that you couldn't tackle with RPA before, Even the last year's show when we had our debut at Finovate in London, that was already, a hot topic, and a lot of the banks we talked to were going there. The interesting thing was having toured even in the US and going all over the place and talking to large banks and small banks is the whole topic of comprehension of the entire ecosystem, deep comprehension of systems, even to be honest, the tackling of legacy problems was a topic everybody was interested in. I attended one conference at one of the larger banks where even to the very highest levels, even CEOs were talking about how to apply AI to software engineering and talking in real AI technical terms. But the success rate wasn't there yet. So you could feel it wasn't there. I think what's happening now is, the RPA and the agentic implementations to optimize processes and make the customer experience better are now flourishing. I think actually the moat around there is actually probably not as big as it needs to be, because to implement an agent to do something now is becoming more and more easier if it's a micro task or if it's a one-off task. But we're seeing now that people are starting to believe that even the more complex tasks, complex architectural tasks, revising a legacy, maybe even doing a transformation with the assistance of AI, that's beginning to take hold. People are starting to believe that something can come out of that, even though, to be honest, still they're getting a lot of noise and hallucinations if they go to, let's say, traditional, just run-of-the-mill AI solutions.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And I think what I was going to say is, certainly there are a lot of places where we know that the industry is not where it needs to be long term. I think there's some really positive signs in terms of what's possible, and we keep seeing it getting better and better. And I'm also glad to hear that this is something that you're seeing more financial institutions focus on, because this is going to be a critical piece, and every bank is going to need to have an AI strategy here in the very short-term future. So one piece that I wanted to just touch on a little bit more, what pain points are you seeing from banks that they're still struggling with when it comes to getting ready for AI? And has that shifted at all over the past year?
Well, I think part of the pain point is I also worked in a bank. So, you have your daily pressures, you have your committees, you have your regulations, you have your customers and whatnot. To get a good answer out of AI for a micro task or, as I said, the extension of RPA, that's actually becoming, I wouldn't say it's a commodity yet, but it's becoming a sort of package that, your people can put together. To the big problems of, legacies and ecosystems and all sorts of spaghetti systems and things that banks deal with, even mainframe systems, COBOL and all this stuff, there, the level of complexity was so big and it's such a big cost for the banks to handle that on top of that, to learn how to apply AI to this. And it's that you can't just send an LLM to say, okay, here's my core banking system, here's my payment system, why don't you revise it for me? You're not going to get a good result out of that. So you have to go deep into what AI can do and how it actually maps these things. And as I said, ontologies, graphs, validations, all that stuff. And that takes time. So I think it's an issue for banks to be able to build that up on the one hand, to still be maintaining that kind of legacy and complexity all over the place. And then at the same time, invest in building up deep AI knowledge to tackle that problem. I think that's still an issue. One thing that does help, to be honest, is that I think when we're tackling legacy and that kind of complexity, within the AI regulations of Europe and whatnot, you're actually not hitting customer advice. So you don't even have to touch production systems to actually tackle legacy. You can provide the documentation and the specifications and revise your systems and not release it from an LLM to production. You wouldn't want to do that anyway. So the guardrails and the safetiness, you're not giving advice to customers. So it can be, let's say, a little bit more, I wouldn't say loosely applied, but it's a little bit easier application of AI from a regulatory perspective. But from a complexity of AI perspective, it's still a challenge for banks to tackle that issue, especially smaller ones, because, larger ones may have obviously the bandwidth to invest in a whole AI department to go really deep into how AI works. On the other side, some of the medium-sized, smaller-sized institutions, banks, and also non-banks, they won't have that kind of capability to pick up that depth of AI to tackle that complexity in the legacy systems. So that's where we are. I hope we can help.
Yeah, well, and so that actually brings me to the next question. Where does Ablements come in? And obviously, you don't have to go through the entire demo again, because people can go and watch that full 7 minutes there. But how is Ablements set up to address a lot of these concerns?
Well, what the approach we took is there's a lot of things that we can build, agentic pipelines and obviously automations to pull in these in-depth AI technologies. And then if we overlay that if we're focusing on systems and architecture, we can overlay it with our domain expertise, our knowledge, and build the ontology that the AI will follow when it's constructing its picture of the system and also when it answers the queries. That actually is working. So nowadays where, you toss a complex system at Ablements and within an hour, 2, 3, or 4 hours, if it's a more complex, it might take a day or two, you have a very deterministic picture of your system, which means it's built the documentation, the specifications, all the technical docs of the system that were potentially missing. It gives you a chat interface for people to talk to and ask all their technical questions of how to fix things, whether there's any vulnerabilities, learn about the system and whatnot. But it also gives the downstream agents a reliable touch point when the agents are actually doing whatever, coding specifications, putting together a data model, or working through how to apply processes to the existing architecture. That's what Ablements does, is actually it automates a lot of that deep AI tech for banks to be able to apply it to their existing ecosystem at the push of a button. I'm truly excited because we just submitted kind of a proposal for within the EU as well that, a lot of this stuff needs to be democratized because everybody makes a hype about AI, how easy it is. And, you just give it a task and it automatically it does it for you. And that's partially true. But there is a moat there to apply this type of rigidity and determinism and reliability to AI so that the enterprise architectural decisions are made in the right way. And because we automate that, that actually democratizes it for like smaller institutions as well, medium size, even outside of the banking sphere. That's very exciting.
No, it is really exciting. And I think, again, you really should take a look at the demo itself to see how this looks and not just how it sounds. But I'd like to switch gears a little bit. As someone who has won Best of Show twice in a row, what advice do you have for other fintechs when it comes to making the most of their time at Finovate, in terms of preparing for the stage, making the most of the networking sessions or doing something else? What would you tell other companies who are kind of, in your position 2 years ago, coming to Finovate for the first time on how they can really make the most of the event?
This is a good question. I had my Finovate history actually goes back before even last year. If you remember, Greg, I was on stage with one of the companies and I learned from that other company actually that it's good to make it interesting. I mean, to be honest, I see a lot of Finovate demos. You don't have to do cartwheels and, breathe fire through a hoop or whatever. But I see a lot of Finovate demos where people just get up and one or two people and one does the technicals and the other one just speaks. And that's good. I think that's good. But what we usually do is we give it a little flavor. I think twice in a year we've done this kind of skit role playing where it's actually, the buyer or the kind of key person interested in how to apply Ablements, and then obviously me being the seller or the technical person. And it actually phrases the problem in a real way, that this is the real problem of who I'm trying to sell to, and this is the real pitch. So we try to do something a little bit outside the ordinary, to be honest, to capture the audience's attention and make it real for them. Because if, Finovate is an awesome event, everybody's preparing it for it ahead of time. Basically, it's the crown event of fintech in Europe, for sure. But you get, 20, 30 demos. And if they all look the same, it's going to be hard to remember. So do a little something. And as I say, you guys have your rules, so it cannot be anything naughty or dangerous or whatever. But do a little something to make sure that relates to the audience. The networking thing, and to be honest, the whole subsequent thing in this year at Finovate, I found to be amazing. I was actually telling people this, that last year we had to maybe, as introducing ourselves as a company, we went around and, try to garner interest. This year, it was awesome because the interest was there. We didn't have to do anything. Our stand was always full of people and there was good conversations. And a good thing about Finovate, that I've attended about 20 or 30 conferences this year, is I find it to be genuine interest. I said this also to one of the news agencies there, was the key thing. A lot of conferences you go to, I think people go there for whatever reason and they tick off a box or whatever. Here I found we had 30, 40 conversations on the one day that we had the demo up for people to come by and see the demo and whatever. It was genuine interest. So the people were there to actually looking for solutions. We have follow-up now, and it's amazingly good. If you nail your demo and if you're relaxed about it and you know your tech and you know who you're trying to reach, what your solution is, and you believe in it, and that shows on stage, you give it a little flavor, I think Finovate is a good event for that.
That's awesome. Certainly, that's exactly what we're hoping will happen. And I think there's a couple pieces there to pull out. You're absolutely right that, time spent thinking about how the demo is going to reach out and engage the audience is really critical. It's more than just kind of showing what you can do. It's about creating a connection with them. And there's a variety of ways that you can do that. You don't necessarily have to rely on humor or things like that. But as long as you can really demonstrate, you understand what they're going through, you understand the pain points they're dealing with. That's a really critical piece. So obviously the networking side is really important as well, being able to make sure you're positioned to have those conversations. Looks like we have time for one more question, and I'll close with kind of a bigger picture one. Where does Ablements and Ready go from here? What's next on your developmental curve?
I mentioned this before, maybe it is the fad of the week for me, but this democratization and making this available to, making the tech available to the, let's say, the smaller and medium-sized institutions, that matters to me a lot. And I'm getting excited about that because we see it, day in, day out, that the engaging with larger banks in the US and all over the place. It's even sort of a little bit maybe difficult to reach them because they have their departments, all of them. They have multitudes of, enterprise architects working on software engineering and applying AI to whatever. So it's even a little bit difficult to reach them. But when I engage with a medium-sized, smaller-sized company nowadays, and they are still catching up and they just got their new version of Claude or whatever, and they're still toying around with it, to go in there and to offer them a solution that automates and helps that kind of level of the enterprise sector achieve the same type of results as their bigger competitors, that's awesome. So that's where I'm envisioning to take it in the next year.
No, that's great. Really look forward to seeing what comes out of it. Obviously, really well done this past year on listening to the various constituents and making sure that you're continuing to push forward. I have a lot of faith that you'll be able to do it again next time around. In the meantime, congratulations again on taking home a trophy this time. And for our listeners, this will be the end of our FinovateEurope Best of Show recap. We'll switch back to our regularly scheduled programming next week. And of course, you'll hear from another round of Best of Show winners after Finovate Spring, which is coming up in San Diego, May 5th through the 7th. So stay tuned for those. In the meantime, Márk, thanks again for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. It's awesome.
Check out Finovate.com for information on Finovate's upcoming shows and to learn how you can get involved. The discount code Finovate Podcast will save you 20% on tickets to all of our events. And you can email us at info@finovate.com for information on sponsoring, speaking, or demoing. Thanks for listening.